Howdy, and welcome to Risky Standard, an actual play podcast featuring a rowdy group of best friends telling stories and playing tabletop role-playing games together. You can find the show over on Blue Sky at Risky Standard, and you can also find us on the show's Discord, which we'll drop a link to in the show notes below. We're going to be posting some upcoming hints and clues as to what's in store on the road to Season 2 of Risky Standard and our next adventure on the endless treetop sea of the Wild Sea by Felix Isaac. If you have any questions or want to just chat pod stuff, you can, of course, drop us a direct line over at riskystandardpod@gmail.com. I'm your host and GM today, Pete Loftus, and if you're hearing this, it means I'm already dead. No, I'm just kidding.
Whoa.
And today we're going to pick up where we left off with the Division of Silent Accords, where we'll be playing Scum and Villainy, a science fiction setting for Forged in the Dark games by John LaBeouf Little and Stras Asimovic from Off Guard Games. And today I've got with me our returning cast, planetary archaeologist and xenoanthropologist, Dr. Alice Forstall, as played by Malcolm Hall.
What up?
The interstellar soldier of fortune, Argo Cattell, played by fan favorite Mitchell Brewster.
Howdy, very excited to step foot back into the haunted house in space.
And thick-skinned, gun-toting beefcake Bracco Kemmler, lovingly rendered by our very own Timothy Mans.
Beefcake? Ooh.
We need to bring it back.
Beefcake
We need to
in
bring
my
it
head,
back. Not enough beefcakes out there.
And last but not least, of course, we've got producer extraordinaire Liam Doherty in the wings. And when last we met, the camera followed your approach to the seemingly derelict space hulk designated the Aeonian by your ring intelligence handlers within the Division of Silent Accords. This deep space anomaly, the Aeonian, is believed to have been sort of unstuck within the folded space-time of thread space between the beacons, seemingly for centuries, in a sort of ceaseless sojourn crossing the darkness between stars. You were briefed by Baraska Perneb, pro-curator of the Silent Accords, and once aboard, Argo Cattell's modified blockade runner, the Arrogant Neighbor, Perneb informed you that your mission is sort of time-boxed, and the glossy black badges on your chest serve as a kind of one-way communication device into the black box of the Aeonian's strange fundamental interference that seems to cloud communication. You crushed the engagement roll, which gave you an unfettered approach to this derelict vessel, and with the advantage of stealth, you were able to deftly pilot through the debris field that erupted into real space along with this kind of massive space hulk, and you were able to get an up-close look at some of these strange inhabitants that seem to kind of occupy the floating junk around Tenemer 4. These inhabitants are what I believe the good doctor deemed sentinel phages. These are kind of spindly-legged, copper gold-colored, seemingly biological automatons, reminiscent of our real-world bacteriophage, dutifully busying themselves with something in the debris field, kind of mining some rock among the drifting debris, even sort of stitching parts together with some filigreed filaments here. Kind of unclear what they're doing, but you rolled so well that you were able to get up close to the exterior of the Aeonian and chose to enter this derelict hulk through the hangar door you'd identified in your long-range spectronomy, instead of having to go through this gash in the side of the hull. After a bit of finagling with a jammed hangar door and a close call with some sentinel phages, a few even crushed in the slamming of that hangar door, you managed to skid the Arrogant Neighbor into a landing and quickly found that you are not alone aboard the Aeonian. In the dark of the hangar's interior, you discovered a somewhat wrecked Chisel-class light assault shuttle, unmistakably bearing the markings of the Concordat hegemony, the zealously deist interstellar space empire waging kind of a holy war across the heavens at the command of the Hierophant himself to locate the demiurge they believe is hiding among the stars. And with some investigation, you also found this craft had occupants, which, based on kind of what you were able to make out, suffered a far bumpier landing than yourselves. And this craft also had some occupants who did not make out as well. You kind of cased this hangar, found there were a couple of Concordat bodies, some general infantry-looking types, but notably they had a really distended jaw, and they had seemingly been here for a long time. Even though we know based on the intelligence from Perneb, the last detected appearance of the Aeonian was maybe about 3 months ago, these bodies and remains are almost mummified. They look like they've been here for decades at least. Moving right along, you found that there is a door to the interior of this craft that was sealed with a concordat kind of like warning that stated that this vessel had been sealed by order of the Hierophant and that no living thing should pass. But quickly discarding that warning, you crumpled the scroll, broke the wax, busted these doors open, and find yourself now in a wide open chamber. It's sort of dimly lit by a slowly rotating fan blade kind of set into the ceiling above you. There's kind of a hazy light filtering in, and before you is a kind of glacial erratic, like a big boulder with a vertical seam that you can make out from here, sitting on a dais. Above this boulder is kind of a perfectly hewn sphere of stone. This sphere hangs in the air, silent, still, and also bears a kind of big wax seal where a scroll hangs down from that. This boulder is surrounded in like a wide semicircle of candles burning. The air is thick with incense smoke. You can hear the whirring and clicking of machines as these warding engines set up by this previous concordat dispatch sort of left. And that's where we're going to pick up. So you have kind of just opened this door, and I'll start there.
I just want to cross-reference one thing from my notes. The bodies that we found, their uniforms also indicated that they are like modern, present-day Concordat troops, right? Not a historical unit.
That's right. So I think like putting the pieces together between what you heard from Perneb and what you would kind of like visibly recognize as a current uniform, there's sort of asynchronicity here between like what you would expect from kind of the modern era, and these bodies like almost look mummified. Like the skin is dry; they're like almost skeletal remains.
Dr. Forstall, do you want to tell me what we're looking at here?
Yes, these are some sort of fundamental warding contraptions, machines that harness pure fundamental energy. I actually don't know if that's true.
Gizmos even.
Doohickeys,
Gizmos, maybe even doohickeys. Yeah, there's some thingamajigs among the rubble.
Can I maybe roll to get a better idea of what exactly I'm looking at?
Like tell me a little bit about your approach here. You're of course an anthropologist and an archaeologist. Like, how do you kind of begin to analyze this scene? And I would say, just for kind of some notes, right? Like, the air is still here. I think this kind of fan blade above you, it's not like there's like a ceiling fan. I think it's recessed in the ceiling. It's classic science fiction bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just kind of slowly woof, woof, like above you. But this, thick kind of smoke in the air, almost like a haze. And the room is very still. Like, I think the only movement among this kind of field of like incense is probably like what you have disrupted just with your footsteps.
Okay.
Almost like a crypt.
And there's no other way out of the room?
There is a door on the opposite side of this boulder between where you entered and on the opposite side.
There was light coming in from another source besides the candles
the
over
light
there?
is just coming filtered through this inset thing above you.
What if we could shut it off and see what's going on behind it?
Yep. We turn to the corner, flip the switch, fan is now off.
Yeah. It's that simple. What does the scroll say?
Okay, sure.
Let's start there.
Yeah, this sounds maybe like a study roll to me.
What position are we rocking in right now?
Oh, I think this is going to be like a risky standard.
Okay, rolling 3d6. 6.
God damn it. Yeah. So on a 6, I think you can get close here, and I think stepping over, this cabling and these kind of big, kind of like bulky, like wires running like up and down. I think these kind of like warding, they almost look like a little cylinder. Is like in my mind, there's like these kind of votive candles all around, and then I think above them are these kind of like. Or they're like a cipher cylinder, right? And I think they're like kind of slowly clicking and moving back and forth, almost like a prayer wheel or like one of those code cylinders like you'd see in old like cryptography. And they're kind of whirring and clicking as you move along. Each of your progressive footsteps as you get closer, I think even you see this like waft, right? As you're kind of disrupting this like long burning smoke. On a 6, you can kind of step up onto, I think, 2 short steps here up to where the dais is. This scroll is, kind of like dry papyrus. It's sort of stamped with like a deep red wax, and it bears the seal of what you would have probably seen before as like the Amaryllis Legion. All the Concordat expeditionary fleets take their name from families of flowers. And I think that this seal in particular has amaryllis flowers kind of like growing above a tombstone. The scroll itself, I'll say it's handwritten, and you can tell in the script it's the same hand. And it kind of follows on a similar, beat that this site is sealed by order of the Hierophant, that, like very flowery language here, and goes on and on about, like that this is sort of like a heretical place beyond view of the demiurge and the builder. Let no living thing who comes through here pass, right? Like it's basically saying that this is like the front of a mortuary crypt, right? Like it is sealed for all time.
Well, if the builder can't see us, what trouble can we get in? Let's keep moving.
I think it's all hokum, personally, but these machines do something, I believe. We could try to pass the next room, but it may trigger them somehow.
Can I climb up on the rock?
Yeah, so think of this as like, almost like, perpendicular, right? There's this like kind of perfect, smooth sphere.
I want to get up on the rock.
And there's this kind of, on the boulder thing.
Yeah, I guess like I'm interested if, these are sealed by decree. Is there a different way past or up or into any other space we can explore? If the light's filtering through there, past the fan, Yeah,
is it like ductwork behind that fan? Is it like
that's exactly, I guess, what I was checking. Like, what does that mean? Is there a different way to approach what might be a next chamber or another space in this ship?
Yeah, so I don't think I'm going to make you roll to like climb up there. But I would say, as you approach, all three of you, I think, and probably starting with you, Dr. Forstall, since you kind of like led the charge here, as you get closer to these two pieces of stone in front of you, your like the hair on your arms like pricks up. And I think, Brago, by the time you're there, you can almost feel it thrumming. And I would say on a 6 on the study roll, you would probably know that these warding cylinders do dampen fundamental fields. It's sort of like a container of sorts.
Sure.
And I think it's probably clear to you, right, that there is something fundamental here. If you kind of want to like inquire a little deeper, I'd probably have you try to attune here. Attuning is something unique to Scum and Villainy. Attuning is sort of like communing with the Force, if you want to think of it in Star Wars terms. We'd be kind of tapping into something fundamental here.
Yeah, Doc, attune.
Yeah. I'm gonna try and attune with this machine, or not the machinery, the rocks.
Anything from you, Argo? What are you doing right now?
I think Argo is at this point moving around the perimeter of the room. I think I am actually keeping like a really healthy distance between me and this big floating like orb with the warding cylinders on it. I am like on the edge of the room. And I think what I'm looking for is like consoles or any kind of like interactability in this environment. You know what I mean? Like, is this a place that has a thing that someone could have used to like control the doors, control the fan, about, like any kind of input or, kind of interactivity. I guess that's what I'm like. I'm kind of just slowly walking along the edges, studying that, one eye on the good doctor as she is conducting her more thorough study of the the kind of central interest in the room.
Yeah. So is that like a study role for you, you think?
I would say I am not searching like... I'm not digging around, you know what I mean? Like, I'm literally just like walking, kind of like, what can I see without doing any extra work?
What I'd tell you, I think, is that just like the hangar we saw before, Braco took a look at it and was trying to figure out how it was made. And I would say that what is, maybe you're like tracing your hand like along this kind of wall as you're walking across. It has the same kind of low-hanging fog here. And I think there's some of the same like kind of pale blue, like illumination, kind of seemingly coming from the stone. But as you're walking along the wall, it is perfectly smooth. There's no kind of seams or rivets or bumps. What I'll say is it doesn't appear that there's like a keyboard and screen anywhere in this room. Dr. Forstall, you're going to try to attune here. Is this something you've done before, or are you kind of just like operating on vibes here?
I think I grew up around this stuff, and ever since I was a child, I sort of felt like I could speak to the rocks, speak to the stone, speak to the underlying subspace underneath all things. You know, I can commune with it, and it's something that have no formal training in, but you know, it's something I've just naturally done my whole life.
Okay, yeah, I like that. That's like maybe what called you to your field of study in the first place. You do have a move in the Stitch playbook that might be relevant here. Being a kind and gentle DM, I'm going to bring this up for you. But this is the move Doctor Strange, which states, your research and fields of study are fringe, esoteric, and focus on the mystical. You may always handle precursor artifacts safely. When you study an artifact or doctor a strange substance, you may ask one of two questions. What could this do, or why could this be dangerous?
So I guess I'm not going to attune with it. I am instead going to study this artifact.
Yeah, sure.
And that is a 4.
Okay. Technically, I can't punish you for failing this roll. So you got a 4, which is partial. Given that, no negative exactly on a 4. Which of these questions are you asking me?
Let's see. I think I know why it could be dangerous. I want to ask, what does this do?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. So studying this artifact, like, you know, maybe you're like dropped down on your knees, right, on the kind of like top part of this dais, and you're kind of looking at it. And I think the thing that kind of jumps out to you is this seam in the boulder, right? And it is like, just like the hanger and the walls in this room, perfect, right? There's like no kind of line out of place. There's no kind of like chisel mark. It doesn't even look hewn by hand. And this seam kind of goes all the way around the boulder vertically, almost like it's been put together. I think studying this artifact, you know, you got the move. So I would say that you can probably make out that this is a kind of interface.
And so I think I'm going to turn to Argo, who's probably still looking around. Be like, you can stop looking for the interface. I found it. It's right here.
Eyeballing it from, still across from the room. I almost imagine Argo moving kind of like a cat, like kind of slinking at the sides of this room, like deeply wary of the object at its center. It's an interface. Do you know how to utilize it, Dr. Forstall?
I think so. I think now I'm going to try and attune with it.
I think I raise a hand up before, you make your next movement, right? I think we should speak plainly about the situation before us before we set the ball rolling, as it were. The Concordat have clearly considered this an incredibly dangerous site. They don't put these kinds of seals on any kind of location unless it is a considerable threat. They are the most voracious plunderers of tombs and mausoleums I have encountered across this wide galaxy. There is something here that made them think they should not go further. We should be prepared before we begin toying with it. Looking to Bracco again.
He's pulling out a gun like, I'm prepared. What do you mean?
Well, the Concordat also believe that a single entity built the entirety of the universe. So they believe a lot of things. They're very superstitious. They believe in magical items and artifacts. What we know is that magic is simply a science that we do not understand yet.
Is there not a shared similarity between almost all first era artifacts that we found in our network?
Yes, they are one and the same.
Does that not suggest a singular hand, Dr. Forstall?
Hokum. It's a bunch of hokum. Perhaps you are not used to, the same environment that I'm used to. I've spent a lot of time in these environments. I've been in situations not quite like this. I'll give you that. But I think you creep around in the shadows, and I'm, a woman of science.
You cast the light.
Yeah. And I cast the light. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I give you like a little gesture, like, take it away then. Go ahead. Yeah. Attune with this object.
I guess we'll just fucking die.
I might get a headache. I think that's the worst thing that's going to happen.
For sure.
I think Argo, both hands shoved deep into the pockets of this jacket, waiting for Dr. Forstall to attempt to manipulate the interface device.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to keep it at, I think, risky standard because you used your kind of special ability here. Why don't you give me that attune roll?
Do I want to bolster it, though? This could be a big roll. I only have 2 in attune.
So you could swap position for effect, which wouldn't do anything here. You're at risky standard. So you could take a devil's bargain, or you can push yourself.
I'm going to
also have 3 gambits to spend.
Oh, I'm going to use a gambit.
Which you certainly can do. That'll give you an extra dice for this action roll.
Puts us down to 2 gambits.
That's plenty of time to take up stress. Well, we'll use the gambit on this one. 3d6. Oh, boy. 5. Hey, I'll take it.
What does this look like for you? You mentioned like you might get a headache. So I think this is probably like, that same thrumming of like energy that you felt kind of coming near the boulder. I think it's like sort of, you can feel that kind of thrumming and it's like tapping into it, right? You can feel it in your temples. And I think that, kind of like thrumming almost starts to feel like a whisper in the back of your mind, right? And I think it's like beseeching you to kind of remove this seal. If you want to attune here, you need to like let it out.
Ooh, yeah, I removed the seal.
Okay. The seal in my mind is, maybe like 6 inches wide. And how are you kind of prying it off there? It's just wax. Like I'll say, even on
wax.
Your analysis,
I'm just gonna rip it off with my hand.
Okay. And I think like the second you chunk this off, right, on a 5, you and Bracco are right there, and it's like, boom, and you are thrown off the dais, right?
Oh, wow.
I think where all of this room was full of like incense and candle smoke before, you can like see this. I think it even like slows down for a second. Argo, I think you're probably far enough away where maybe we're seeing this from your point of view, where it's like a pulse, like a sphere kind of erupts. At the moment you remove this seal, the candles go out. Yeah. And we're seeing this kind of trailing smoke, and there's just this cavitation happening in the room. This sphere on the top, I think, raises maybe a foot higher, now free of the candles and wax. And it begins to drip. The same copper gold color starts welling up at the top of this sphere, kind of hovering above. And this thick ichor, the color of like lustrous brass, with these sort of deep hues of gold, starts gurgling and bubbling up out of the sphere, dripping down from this kind of hanging ball of stone onto the boulder below. I think you're, kind of like dusting yourself off. It's definitely startled you.
Maybe knocked the wind out of me.
This is almost like a fundamental burst of energy, threw you back. And so this ichor bubbles and drips from this kind of stone above onto the boulder below. Like as it takes these thick globs dripping down, like, you'd see a water splash like into a puddle. But instead of it kind of like hitting the normal fanning effect, it's like it crystallizes and reforms. Again, like the cesium example used before. So this crystallization drips back down, and you can see it kind of forming as a puddle at first at the top of the boulder, falling into this seam along the stone. And I think this flow of this ichor, I think, continues, maybe even increasing a bit until this sphere at the top is almost just like it's just falling over it. Like I'm trying not to say chocolate fountain, but that's like the image in my head, right? Is like it's smooth,
chocolate fondue fountain.
It's beautiful. These deep hues of gold, like the thermoambular arc of coronal mass injection. You can see patterns, in this ichor here, and it's beautiful. I think it even gives off sort of a faint glow, and now you're illuminated only by the light above, right? So in this kind of column of light, and this, melting of this viscous liquid starts to bead down the center of this seam in the boulder. Argo, what are you doing?
Okay. So we've got a fountain of cesium kind of erupting from this boulder and crystallizing underneath it and flowing down like over it into the seam running along it, right?
Yeah, no, it's not like a geyser or anything. Like I think it's just flowing from this stone.
Is the stuff that's gathering under it like forming a structure?
I would say right now it is like beating in this seam, and unless you want to give me a roll or something, I think that's what you can make out.
Well, that's a great question, huh? What does I was really ready to like kill some Concordat troopers, maybe like, like lure one of them in under like a false flag kind of thing. I am less overall equipped for weird science. I think what Argo is honestly doing is moving to Dr. Forstall, and I am going to like kind of move over there to pick her up while keeping my eyes on the kind of like flowing thing. But I am not the person who can deal with this problem, and it's important that the person who can is like up and ready to deal with it. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm like moving over to like kind of like not politely. I think like it's like moving over, grabbing like the back of her jacket and yanking her up to like be standing again, right? Like there appears to have been a problem with the interfacing doctor. Can you tell me what it's doing now?
Whoa.
Oh, it's beautiful. So beautiful. I've never seen anything like it.
Dr. Forstall is an overweight guy from New Jersey.
Who's just seen a delicious Italian hoagie.
Yeah, so that's as good a moment of any where I think this just continues, right? Like, and as you're pulling up and kind of wheezing and getting yourself back on your feet.
Dusting myself off, coughing a little bit. I'm walking over. I know, like, I really want to take a sample of this, but I know whatever's contained within there is probably not safe to, like, handle or take back to study. I've already seen what power has come from releasing it, and I figured if I try and contain that and put it in my backpack, what's going to happen when I try and open it back up again? So I'm not going to do that, even though I really want to.
Rocco's thinking about shooting it.
Yeah. Is there any... I don't have any more psychic connection to it, though.
Oh, no. I mean, I think you still are feeling this like thrumming, right?
Thrumming of power. So I'm going to, can I get it? So like, I'm going to, like, now that it's cracked open, I can interface with it.
I think like this continues, right? Like in the time that you've gotten yourself back on your feet and like, you know, kind of been reminded that this sort of thrumming and pulsing like energy here, like is just, it's loud. It sounds like static or like wind in your ears at the moment. And I think that this kind of undulating between solid and liquid as it like glops into this seam in the boulder. These crystalline structures kind of folding and crumbling under their own weight from where it's dripping begins to kind of bead down to the bottom here. You mentioned trying to keep away from it. And I think at this point it's flowing fast enough where it's come down the bead and it's even kind of spilling over like the steps of this dais. I think what starts to kind of happen is this seam suddenly parts the rock in two, falling to each side, right? Like it's like thick and syrupy. This boulder suddenly splits. This ichor laps in the hue of the stone, right? Like, so as it splits open, I think you see more of this copper gold here. And as it opens flat, almost like blossoming like a flower, it's now kind of puddling, right? In this like, almost like a basin. And as these kind of puddles are dropping into this kind of crystalline structure, I think you would notice this, right? Like the crystal, instead of just dissipating, kind of starts to rise up from the stillness of the rest of this basin. And I think at first, you see this almost like the beginnings of a human skull. And connected to it, like I think, is a sort of skeletal figure. And it's almost like it's like dripping into form. And as it's like falling and pattering on this like skull, instead of kind of making to the basin, like you start to see shoulders and then arms and then like a rib cage kind of forming here. And it continues in this stillness all around you. And I think it's almost like you see the musculature, the body form, and then as it begins to slow, I think it kind of solidifies as a shroud over this skeletal figure. And from one arm beneath the veil, this skeletal arm, I think, cradles like a swaddled infant. You would recognize it like a human child. And, this whole figure, this silhouette, is rendered in this pale copper gold cesium ichor. And as, I think the last drops fall from this stone above, the kind of infant swaddled in the crook of the arm, I think almost looks angelic, kind of austere, nuzzled into the veil, turns its head to you, Dr. Forstall, and with the kind of flanged voice that speaks with many voices, utters, "Welcome."
Can we take a break?
Yes.
That was so scary.
Told your asses it's a haunted house.
The talking skeleton baby. Oh my God. Okay. All right.
I think Argo looks to Dr. Forstall and is like waiting a beat to see, is Forstall equipped to respond to this thing? Or is she too like awestruck by this weird alien?
I think awestruck, certainly for a moment. Then she composes herself. And then asks, what are you exactly?
I am merely an echo of your past, your present, your future. We had not anticipated your arrival. Nevertheless, long we had waited.
Were you anticipating any arrivals?
Our sojourn had been long and lonesome, though if you are anything like the others, you would make a welcome addition to our menagerie.
Ooh,
don't like being a menagerie.
Yeah.
And I think like
all
it is still. The movements here like don't appear lifelike. The head of the infant turned, but that's like it. This veiled figure is still. Bracco, what's going on with you? You've pulled yourself back up to your feet. You've seen Argo kind of come over here and get Dr. Forstall up on her feet. What are you doing?
Bracco is restraining himself and not pulling out any weapons. But I think that one of the many things strapped to him, he does have the null field emitter. The field emitter that, like, if it comes to it and we need to kind of throw up any type of defense, he is waiting for the word from either the people he deems as the brains of the operation. He is there to break through doors, walls, carry people to safety if need be, but he's kind of waiting for the good doctor and our friend Argo to use their expertise.
I think Argo catches Bracco's eyes, and I think instead of saying anything, I imagine, especially being guys who have operated in combat situations, who have operated in space, I think there's probably like a ring hand sign language. Like I imagine probably there's an entire there's like a speaking language for like ring hand sign because there are so many different species who don't vocalize. I think there's also probably a like combat shorthand of this, right? And I imagine like one hand against his jacket, right? Non-threateningly. Argo throws up like the hand sign for like hold, right? Like hold and ready, right? Like don't do it yet, but like be ready to.
Oh yeah.
And then I think maybe I might step in here if that's.
I've asked 2 questions. You can ask some questions before we die.
I think I step up beside Dr. Forstall, right? Back straight, shoulders high, and I open my jacket to flash the Silent Accords badge. Which one looks like it's actually speaking? The baby or the weird hooded figure?
This like shrouded figure, imagine like a shroud on top of like a skeleton, right? So you can't see a face. I think you can probably make out like a form, but it is the infant that's speaking to you.
It's evil Catholic iconography is what it is.
So I look down at the baby then. I flash the badge. I look down at the baby.
Hey, listen, baby.
And I say,
I'm going to take you downtown, all right?
I think that's the vibe a little bit. Is I think Argo steps up and is like, okay, but like we're going to talk like 2 people. I'm going to talk a little bit like I'm a weird space cop. So I think it's like flash of this like badge on the inside, stepping up and in like a deeply controlled cadence, right? I'm Argo Cautel, agent of the Boundless Ring, authorized by the Aphelion branch to act as its representative. We are explorers and scientists who bear you no ill intent. Are you the operator of this vessel? What is its purpose?
I am merely an echo. This image was selected to represent a form familiar to your species and level of advancement to make you more comfortable in your surroundings.
Are you the echo that pilots this ship? And I, gesture to the thing that we're in.
I think it would repeat, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm merely an echo.
You are an echo. You said that a couple times.
What happened? Just continuing, right? What happened to the men here? I'll call them the Concordat to see if that rings anything. But what happened to the soldiers in white who were here before? Did you kill them?
I think the baby, this like kind of chubby, like cherubic face. You can like kind of see it like arch an eyebrow or like cock its head a little bit at the word kill. We have had several interlopers in recent cycles who have been welcomed.
I think a heavy sigh, like looking back to Dr. Forstall. I'm out of my depth here. Talk to the alien, Bracco.
This might be your only chance to talk to an alien.
I think in the way that, and whether it works or not, Bracco does have the move scary. You have an air of menace and danger obvious to everyone. You gain potency when trying to intimidate someone. If done immediately after a show of force, also take 1 + 1 d6.
1d forward, so you gain potency when trying to intimidate.
And I don't know if it's quite, I guess it is kind of intimidation. He doesn't know, kind of squats down, still like squatting down is probably at like 5 feet tall. To the baby goes, the good doctor here has asked you some questions, and I believe you need to start answering a bit more clearly.
Are you like shaking your finger at it, or like you just kind of
no? I think Bracco knows how to deal with things with force, and usually gets his way by being scary. And whether this life form, whatever kind of thing it is he's going to be like, well, if I can scare it or make it feel like it needs to listen to one of us, it is one more attempt at making this thing give us any information, or else it's just the echo in this room. And if it's not going to give us anything else, I mean, Braga's going like, there's a door. We can start walking through that. And if it doesn't want us to, then we'll start doing something else and we'll deal with it then.
Yeah, give me like maybe a command roll on
Sure.
this. I'm going to say this is, I'll say standard control.
I can't wait for it to just kill me. All right, roll 1d6. 6!
Nice.
Bada bing.
Baby is very scared.
Yeah, being 6'5", you have really tough guyed this baby. And, I think like as you kind of get gruff with it, this shrouded infant, I think, kind of raises like one chubby baby hand, but moves with like the grace of an adult, right? But like kind of extends like a fat baby finger, I think, up from where it's sort of swaddled in the crook of this like skeletal arm. And I think when this finger raises, you hear a lurching and shuddering from the far side of the room. The dais that you're on with this like shuddering and lurching, you would even kind of maybe feel like some vibration as your feet. And this ichor that's been like dripping from this stone has at this point dribbled down these steps, and maybe would have like seen this if we looked a little closer initially, but this same kind of beating like is kind of surrounding the dais here, extends outward across the floor of the room, and there's a long channel that leads to the door far side. And this channel I think is a little wider, but I think with this finger like lifting, you can see this kind of copper gold fluid like fill this channel, start coursing kind of towards the door, almost like it was at the command of this like finger raise, right? And this stone door here behind the boulder and the echo starts to kind of like lurch open. And I think probably with that, you see this whoosh of the incense, smoke, and candle pull into this opening of the door. And I think the echo returns its hand to the swaddled garb here. And I think probably in the same voice before, right? It says, "Welcome. Please proceed to the interior."
I think I'm like, not turning my back towards it, maybe like backing up towards the wall, and like she's thoroughly terrified and wants to move on.
And with this like arm kind of tucked back under the swaddled robes of the infant, I think you can like even hear this like plinking as it looks like it's starting to melt back again into the like basin beneath it. And it's pretty quick. These like crystal structures start kind of like breaking and liquidizing again, dribble back into this channel. I think it starts slow, but it happens kind of all at once, where it falls like a crystal shattering, right? But it splashes into this basin, dribbling into the channel. And, I think that this channel leading towards the door is maybe like 4 inches wide. You can see those swirls of deeper gold back in this liquid, right? And suddenly, after all this commotion, it is the three of you back in this stone oval room. Now the candles are not lit. I think that these warding cylinders have also gone quiet, and this door is open, and you can see that there is like some dim light further from this doorway, but that's, I think, what you can make out here. And I'm going to click the 12-step clock for Aeonian stability ahead one.
Do we feel something? Is there like a...
Yes. I think that as you were approaching, you could feel this like shuddering, right? Like as you got closer to the exterior of the Aeonian, this vast space hulk, almost like columnar basalt, like this column of stone. And when you first saw that and felt this, I think the sensation would be clear, is that it was like shuddering and then releasing, almost like an engine turning over. You feel this like same thing, right? As I think like the stone doors behind you complete their lurching movement in their track, when you have the same like sensation of like, and it's like it turned over. I don't think it knocks you off your feet. You can just kind of feel it. It's like a cold draft entering a room, but it moves past you and it's gone.
Dr. Forstall takes a deep breath, neatens her clothes, her tunic or whatever. And, maybe unprompted, just sort of says like, clearly this is a metallic nanobot substance that's formed a part of the AI of the ship that's been around for a long time. Nothing more, I'm sure.
Argo has pulled out, we saw this earlier, but I've pulled out this like black leather book with the circle embossed on it. It is like the ring manual. And I am opened to like the back half of the book, which is like, I think a notebook, right? It is like front half propaganda material, back half a journal, basically. I think I'm like scribbling some thoughts here very quickly. Pluralized self-referential nouns. I look at Bracco. Possible collective intelligence. We should prepare for ambush from multiple directions as we pass forward. There's an ambient psychic phenomena as well. Knew what we thought it wanted us to see.
Know thy enemy.
I think I look up. There's this fan above us, right? Is there... we were talking about this earlier, then we kind of got caught up because the strange goop baby creature arrived.
Baby alien butler. Welcome,
yeah. Is there like ductwork or like a vent above this fan? You know what I mean? Does it look like there is a passageway above us? Or does it look like it is like a solitary fan? Or is it a part of like a ductwork situation?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of like wide, I think kind of these slow rotations. And it's like inset with this stone ceiling. There's something behind there. Like it's not just open air. What you can see is that there's like a dim light filtering through.
Who wants to get on my shoulders?
We have a drone. Can I?
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah. Is there space for the delinquent to try and slip past these fan blades and see if there's something up there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that they're like wide fan blades, like moving slowly. I think you can probably slip that through and make your way up there.
I'm happy to like...
Oh, the recon drone. A small drone for surveillance, mapping, intelligence gathering can be given simple instructions. Yeah. I don't think it has like a massive range, but you can set it up there.
I think Argo will explain his thinking to the squad before I like actually do this.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that I'm not insane. Whatever this thing is, it clearly wants us to continue down the pathway ahead of us. And it seems to have a different disposition towards human life than we do. If the Concordat behind us are anything to go by. If there's another way to advance into the heart of this ship that is not the path laid out for us by the terrifying unknown extraterrestrial intelligence, I'm partial to pursue that path. I'd like to send the delinquent up there and see if there's ductwork that we can use to advance further in the ship. Is that all right with you?
I like the way you think.
Yes, that'll be fine.
So with that said, I think I pull out my communicator, right, which I think is like paired to the drone. I'm going to pilot it, right? I'm not just going to like give it an instruction. Maybe this is like, taking direct control mode. And I want to like try and just scoot it up there, looking at the feed and see like, is it a viable route for entry into the ship? Or do we have to keep going the suggested way?
Yeah. I'm trying to think like, I guess maybe this is like a rig roll.
Yeah, I can also helm if that's like, piloting kind of. It's not quite
I can kind
of
see that as helming. Sure. I'm going to give me a helm roll.
All right, I have 1d6 in helm. What are we looking at position and effect wise?
I'm going to say this is controlled standard.
Right.
No immediate threat detected.
Yeah, dude, I'm just playing with my RC car here. All right, rolling 1d6. Ooh, all right, that's a 2.
That's a 2. What did we call it before?
It's the DF-19 delinquent.
Oh, the delinquent, excuse me. So the delinquent finds its way to you in this antechamber and I think kind of zips up without too much trouble through this fan blade. And from the feed, I would say probably the first thing that you would notice is that there is a lot of chop and interference. And just like the communication you had with Perneb, I think the further away the drone gets, meaning the deeper the delinquent gets into the ship, the more static and like breakaways there are, right? Like I think you lose the signal here and there. But in this kind of fuzzy image on a 2, I think that you get a couple of glimmers of like ductwork. This light is kind of emanating from, I think, periodically placed lights in the wall set into the stone like we saw before. And, I think it cuts out and it cuts back in. The delinquent sees kind of a forking path. There's more of these fans. I think it cuts out again, crackling and staticking. And when it cuts back in, the delinquent is grounded. like it's almost like lost. It's like hovering. And I would say on a 2, I think the last images you see before the feed cuts out are the tinkling and scuttling of the same copper brass spindly legs here. And I think you see the feet of the delinquent kind of rise a little bit off of the ground in this shaft and seems to be kind of moving and jostling, as you can faintly hear, I think, like the tinkling of like legs as it kind of like scuttles along.
Wait, is the drone picked up by these things?
Seems like it.
Ductwork does not look like it is a viable approach vector. I think I click on a flashlight and I aim it at the doorway that leads out of here.
I think it's me or you, Argo. Keep the doctor in the middle.
I nod in agreement. I'm happy to let Bracco take the front on this one.
Yep. Okay.
Why don't you go first? Okay, cool.
Okay, we've lost the delinquent. I think we have to advance forward and keep our eyes peeled for any objects of interest. Our primary goal is still to make it to the command center or the engine room, right? Those are like the 2 key areas we want to investigate, I assume.
Right.
For trying to figure out how this machine works, how it's been able to travel through thread space independently and seemingly under self-navigation, either of which requires us to get deeper into the ship.
As we start creeping that way, Doc, do these sentinel phages, how do they communicate? I see their color, I saw the baby. Is this all the same thing? How do they know we're here?
Without proper research in a laboratory environment, there's really no way of telling. I can make some assumptions that, if it's not the same thing, probably some other more subtle form of communication we're not aware of and we're not able to pick up.
Are those sentinel phages? Do we think that they're the minions of something bigger? Or are they... or do we think they're the ones in control?
I know about as much as you do at this point.
Yeah, I agree. So, the kind of
are they minions? Yes or no?
Roll study to see if they're minions.
Banana. I don't know anything about minions. We talked about this offline recently. Like, my minion lore is like they're yellow and wear overalls, and I don't know.
They like bananas.
Were locked away in a cave during World War II.
Yes, so they were unable to serve.
Not serving the evilest person in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, back on track here. Your decision is to proceed through this entrance, following this like channel of this Ichor.
Yeah, I think we head forward, Bracco at the front, Dr. Forstall in the center, with Argo pulling up the rear this time.
I think in the ring hand sign that I think all of us would at least have a passing knowledge of. Even Dr. Forstall, I imagine you have an idea of what is being communicated.
I have 2 doctorates, Tim. Okay, I think I know a little bit of hand sign. All right.
Yeah, just keep an eye out for, especially as we saw the smoke getting pulled through, that just makes me think that there is always something beyond that pulls it, that like that smoke is going somewhere. It's being pulled that way. So if there's like, cracks in the walls or anything like that that can be explored, is there any places where we could see smoke getting pulled through, that doesn't just look like doors or doesn't look like what we would understand as a way through, more vents, things like that?
I think like you can kind of feel this breeze, and you can probably kind of like follow even some of these remaining like wafts down this hall that the door leads into, and you can make your way down this hallway. It's pretty empty. It smells like stale air, but as you make your way down there, I think that you can see this kind of light growing, and it kind of like maybe curves gently, reaching the end of the hallway. I think silhouetted at the end of this hall is kind of like statue on a pedestal. And the statue itself looks familiar but disjointed. It would be like kind of vaguely, humanoid. Like there's something not quite right about it, almost like it's in cross-section pieces that are just slightly misaligned. But it's stone, same gray stone as this boulder. And I think behind that, you can see that you're kind of reaching almost like a balcony edge, right? And this balcony edge continues and opens up into a like vast interior. I would say as you're kind of making your way down this hallway, I think you can also see kind of like a silhouette slumped at the kind of pedestal of this statue. Maybe the pedestal is like 3 feet high. The statue probably stands like 7 feet. And making your way to the end of this hallway, the interior, as the Echo mentioned, opens up before you. And what you can see here is that this statue is one of many on this kind of long balcony. And, what you would be able to make out from here, I think, is that the interior of the Aeonian is hollow. And I think it's this massive, just sprawling interior, almost like a cathedral. The pools in my mind are like space colonies, like Elysium or like Mobile Suit Gundam or
like O'Neill cylinders.
Oh, O'Neill cylinders. Thank you. If it's like columnar basalts, I think like each of these flat panes that make up the exterior are kind of mirrored here as well. And there is kind of a central sort of column here, kind of reaching from end to end, suspended, like, you can think of it as like a rod. I have an image I'll drop in the chat just as kind of a loose reference. I'll share this in the show notes as well. And then I think the sides of this are, dotted in with like constructions. This is kind of breathtaking in a way, right? Like you are suddenly hit with vertigo. Like this is a cavernous interior. We don't even really have, I think, like a good example of this. Like, the closest thing I think of is like just a massive cave, right? So it's all this kind of pale stone, just sprawling and huge. These statues kind of line this balcony that runs the length of this interior. And you can like see, I think even on the opposite sides of you, it's not too dark in here. It's kind of dim somewhat, but there's like buildings, and I think there's like even lifts that run vertically along these panes, horizontal being the length of it. As you look around here, probably the most striking detail would be this gash, right, which we saw from the exterior of the Aeonian. And this column, kind of running the length of this just enormous space, is intersected at a point, I think, to your left, some distance away. And, again, I just want to like reiterate the staggering scale of this, because inside you can see sort of crashed into this central column is another ship. Like the Aeonian is so large, there's another ship inside of it. Crashed and almost like embedded into this column is I think like the prow of this would be kind of angular. I think you could probably assume that this is almost like a battering ram. So the front end of this craft is pointed and looks like it's reinforced. It is almost like the outside of the Notre Dame or that basilica in Barcelona. It is like ornate. It looks like the outside of a cathedral. And it is sort of ajar. You can almost see its path as it entered the ship, like presumably like rammed and tore itself inside. And it is this big, heavy kind of front, almost like the front of a locomotive. If you think of like a sort of Catholic, space Catholic locomotive here, has kind of charged the battering ram through, but it is like lodged into this place. I think you can see signs of damage even on this column, right? Like it's kind of broken and rubbled, but it is just of staggering size. Like you probably would not have seen this anywhere except for in the vacuum of space. So I think seeing it like in some kind of atmosphere is quite bizarre. And yeah, so there's the statue in front of you. There's this kind of vast cavernous interior with what appears to be presumably some kind of concordat vessel lodged within. And there's this kind of silhouette at the base of the pedestal of the statue.
Above us, like, is there a gravity here? Is it like we are on a mezzanine overlooking the bottom and then it's like a sky above us? Or is it like a gravity such that above us there is also city?
Ooh.
Yeah, like if you think about this as maybe like a hexagon, right? Like you are on one interior wall of the hexagon and you are kind of on, one of 5 or 6 of these like panes of cityscape. And I hesitate to like call it a cityscape. It's very, greebly. I think there are definitely areas that look more like a actual city. From where you're standing, it's quiet in here. Like you don't see trucks or cars kind of bustling. There's no like people on the streets, but there is movement, right? Like, and I think what you see in this same kind of color of like cesium, copper, gold, there are like almost like a flock of birds, but the closer you look at these like flocks of birds, they individually like don't really have like a head, and when they beat their wings, I think it's almost like they fall kind of into themselves and kind of like folding and merging and bending, becoming over and over familiar but strange.
It reminds me when you watch like a bad AI attempt at doing a video where it's like when a person walks, it can't make a video, so it's just like these weird images melting into each other over and over to produce an effective movement.
Exactly. I shared a link in our channel of like exactly that, which is like a kind of generated like life form thing. And, you know, they look bizarre. I'll share it in the show notes too. It just looks confusing.
I don't like
think,
looking at it. Yeah, it's disgusting to me.
But they don't seem super interested in you. Like there's like flock of these things kind of just transiting this inner atmosphere. You know, I think there's like some vapory cloud sort of stuff, and it's breathable.
Okay. I think I marched yeah, right. I think I marched forward and I marched towards this like statue that's like kind of on like at this mezzanine with like the figure slumped in front of it. I think there's like a thing that's happening in Argo's brain right now, which is that like what's in front of him is too much to deal with. It is a whole new range of possibility and meaning that he does not have the tools to necessarily comprehend. So I think he's like instinctively switching into this operator mode. It's just like, what can I do right now? And it's like body on the ground in front of me, gather intel, like plan, prepare, you know, so he's like, can't even think about the majesty of this bizarre space creation. What's the thing right in front of me that I can like get information about and count myself a little bit more?
And I think while Argo's doing that, walking closer to the balcony, Bronco wants to pull out some kind of binoculars to get a closer look at what is going on the other intruder ship. Like, what is going on there? How are the things in this space reacting to a bigger version of us, another intruder? What does it look like when a ship has been left here?
And Dr. Forstall, you are probably the most prepared for this sort of thing, right? Like, you have been in precursor ruins, you have been in like kind of strange and unknowable places before. What is going through your head?
A lot of precursor ruins, there's not this much life.
That's an astute observation. Yeah. We'll look forward to your next paper on the subject.
if I make it out of here.
Brago, why don't... You know what? I don't actually think you need to roll for this. If you have an optical scanner or binoculars or something, yeah, why don't you mark that spy gear? And I think pulling out like a kind of... I don't know. You tell me. What's like? Is this like a monocle, like a telescope, like something more techie and weird?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a visor, you'd slide them on like a pair of sunglasses, but a visor. I think specifically it looks like on Endor the stormtroopers on their like flying bikes.
They're scout troopers.
Yeah,
and it does have a visor.
A visor kind of thing. It looks like that he can pop on, and it's something that like once taken off can be, you know, slid into an inner pocket.
I like this idea. Maybe you pop it on like sunglasses and it folds out, right?
Yeah,
like,
and
like
I think it
expands or something. So as we kind of like zoom and enhance with the benefit of your ocular visor here, you're checking out this battering ram ship, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it looks like a sepulcher, kind of like Eastern European, Eastern Orthodox or like Vatican Catholic. Like there are filigreed golds and nooks and crannies and like crenellations all over this thing. It's very textured. And I think halfway up, maybe you'd probably be able to make out like a command deck or like a bridge, of course, adorned with like the 7 spires of the Concordat hegemony, representing the 7-spoked wheel, the 7 paths to the builder. It bears all the trappings of a Concordat like vessel. I think in kind of like a large ornate like plaque, maybe on one side of this, you see the same sigil as on the warding seals, sort of like a gravestone with amaryllis flowers. And I think as you like click and turn the wheel on the side or whatever of the kind
running
of,
through the various different filters I can put on what I'm looking at.
Yeah. Exactly. And so one of them is maybe fundamental signatures, right? I think that is when your scope lights up and the exterior of this craft within the Aeonian is towards this battering ram area and up towards this bridge is crawling with these sentinel phages, right? I think even of various sizes, like I think you can see some which are almost like a accumulation of them, like purpose built.
Okay.
I think there's even some that like take the shape of like a crane or something, kind of like lifting pieces out of this thing. And I think as you have that scope setting on, you can see that this column is almost like beating like a vein going towards, I'm going to say like to the left of you is like the aft. That's the back, right? And with the benefit, I think, of your enhanced like zoom on this, we knew the exterior of the Aeonian had this bulbous accretion, like the knot in a tree. We can see that on the inside here too. And this column, where the column meets the back wall, is like where this seems to have like really taken root. And it's like lumpy and weird. But with your zoom, you can see standing out, right? Like in this like tumor, there's like a basilica.
Okay.
7 spires in gold and white.
First question, the gold that is on there, you can tell the difference between the gold that is there because Concordat used it in their design and the copperiness of the sentinel phages. Is the gold we're seeing on there like a weird web that they are spinning around this thing that is like they're taking it apart and using pieces? Like,
give me a study roll.
Okay.
I'm going to say this is like a gathering information thing, so
Okay.
no consequence
Right.
here. You're just trying to gain a deeper knowledge.
Well, let me tell you, I got none in study. So maybe I will roll and then hand over the goggles to our good doctor here to...
We can do like a... Can we do
You
like
can do a group action.
Yeah,
group
you
study?
Yeah.
Like, all right, like, this is probably if Bronco like points it out, right? Like, I imagine.
Yeah, takes these off, hands them over, kind of. We also probably all have our own goggles. I don't need to share mine.
Actually, I think Argo actually does have. It is like a kind of like, this like slightly techier version, but it is like a like spyglass like mono. Like the
Love
single
that,
like
Oh, like a little telescope thing?
yeah, like an expanding telescope with like a single lens.
Like the lenses drop in front of it or something.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're doing this as a group action then?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Forstall, do you want to study with us?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Who wants to lead?
Yeah. I guess since
I have the highest in study. I could lead the action.
Well, it's whoever leads is the one taking stress. Is really the.
Oh yeah.
But you are also the smartest one, so maybe you should.
I'll do it.
just stress out a little bit, nerd.
Yeah.
So to lead a group action, each participant team member takes an action roll. You'll take the best result, which applies to all participants, but the leader takes the stress for each 1 to 3 result.
All right. I got a cool 1d6 in study.
I got a 0, so am I just
You roll
rolling
2 and take
two
the
and take the
lower.
worst for this too?
Yeah. All right.
All right. Ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Nice.
Got a 5,
I take-
3, and a 5. So that would be 1 stress for you,
Not bad.
Dr. Forstall. So that succeeds. And so I think the 3 of you kind of brave explorers here kind of taking a gander at this. This is far away, right? Like we saw how big this ship was from the outside. This is kind of at the very end, just to the left towards you. And I'm going to say you're like maybe halfway down the kind of bulk of this where this hangar door was. And at this far end, you can see this basilica. And I think it has a kind of like gold and white sort of pinstriped like dome roof where these 7 spires reach out, almost like the Hagia Sophia actually is like the pull in my head. So, like 7 spires around this dome. On that close look, you would be able to see with the benefit of your equipment that like gold on a close look is this pooling of liquid, right? Like it's like you can see even from here, I think, those same kind of bands of darker color in this cesium gold. I think it looks from a distance a lot like what you'd expect from like a Concordat like temple. And on closer look, it's strange and familiar in the same way that these statues in front of you are, where it's like 7 spires, but they're kind of disjointed almost, or they look like coral is like the image in my head, where they're kind of like not perfect. They are almost like an accretion. If you can imagine the back half of like the Hagia Sophia, the tumor is almost like grown up around it, or maybe this basilica has grown out of it. And you got a 5. There are these same kind of like weird birds like roosting here. You can see one of these flocks maybe coming to land. Like as they land, they I think actually like pool together. And I think there's another chisel ship here.
The second one?
Yeah.
They're plundering this ship for relics.
I think Argo's looking from like the ship to this bizarre basilica replica thing that's being built. I think it's something stranger than that, Dr. Forstall. What is our pathway for getting down into the actual inner walls of the cylinder and like approaching?
Yep, great question. So I think where you're standing, imagine you're kind of looking into this cavernous interior. There's this like kind of balcony that stretches on to the left. There are other doors, like they kind of lead to the interior from this like balcony. But periodically throughout this structure, there are lifts that I think go kind of like around the interior. And around this column in the center, there are like horizontal lifts. And, you know, I think they're like less like a platform and more like a subway car or like an enclosed kind of thing. And I think they'd shuttle along here and there.
They're like, what is it, funiculars?
Yeah, that's a good pull.
Wait, what's that? Funiculars?
Funicular is like a cable car.
They're like, they go up like slopes. They're meant to go up like the sides of like mountains. They're often like ski resorts and things. Wait, so the subway cars are on the column, like in the one that's floating in the center of the space?
There are ones that go around the interior of the hexagon, like almost following the outline of it. And then there are also ones that go pane to pane on the hexagon along this column.
Are they connecting into the column, though? What Argo's trying to figure out is like, is that big column in the center of this place a destination, or is it a piece of machinery? Like, is there anything that indicates that it has like an interior we could get into, or is it looking like, you know what I mean? Like, is there...
Unknown, I think, from what you can see here. If you want to...
Well, I guess, are the subway cars leading directly into it?
Into it, like inside the column, you mean?
Yeah, like, do they go into the column, or are they like passing up, you know, above or below it, I guess?
I think they're like on the surface of it.
Okay. There's a body in front of me, right? What's up with that guy? Let's look at the guy close to us, and then let's figure out how we're going to deal with this giant fucking place.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you guys have kind of like maybe taken a knee right here at the exit of the hallway. In front of you is like one of many statues that line this area. And yeah, I'd say you can probably make it out from here. Concordat dress. This is, I think, a more, I guess, stately set of armor in the customary white ceramic of the Concordat. In the breastplate, probably that same seal, right? Like the headstone with amaryllis flowers. And it's wearing a breathing mask like you saw before. I think it's kind of slumped on one hand, like palm flat to the ground, and is kind of like resting up against the statue.
I'd like to use my Physiker ability to study this corpse.
So yeah, your Physiker ability, you may study malady or corpse and gather info from a crime scene or corpse. Sure. Yeah, walk me through it.
I'm just going to move his body around and play with it and see if I can
picking him up like a toddler.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna try and take a peek around, like see if that, you know, he died from like a piercing implement, or perhaps a blunt force trauma, or perhaps he just got very sick.
Sure. So that would incur a study roll.
4.
And so, you know, I think it's like you lean down here. He's kind of wearing this, like, I think I mentioned like before, like this kind of simple breathing mask with like a tube connected to something at his belt. And, you know, I think maybe you get down on a knee, and as you kind of begin to examine him, it's like maybe it's the moment, you know, you kind of like loosen the breathing mask. And as you, I think, are kind of like take the mask off, all of a sudden, a hand clasps to your arm, right? And I think, like coughing and sputtering, stab the spire, you're real.